Unni, you've been in embedded systems a long time. Give me the simplest example of an embedded system.
I would say it's probably like a really simple microcontroller that is just turning an LED on and off. Just something as simple as that.
And the most complex one?
Those would probably be the ones that are really like mission critical, like those in the aeronautical industry, or even like a more simple thing, or more personal thing would be like a pacemaker or something like that, where you absolutely cannot have it go wrong. So
Okay, so that's the range
extreme,
of
yeah.
functions. Today's career, embedded systems. They're computer systems designed to perform specific tasks within a larger mechanical or electronic system. They're typically not general purpose, but integrated into devices that control functions, process data, and interact with the environment. And today we have someone who can speak authoritatively about this. Unnikrishnan has extensive software design and development and maintenance experience in embedded and Linux or Linux based systems at companies like HCL, IGT, and now with the Bose Corporation. He has driven architectural and strategic initiatives, facilitating and mentoring team members. He has worked with custom and open source components on platform software spanning multiple products and customers at scale. So, apart from recruiting and training talent, he is technical lead on numerous projects, product and project deliveries for with different teams. My name is Venugopal. I head Idea Skip Communications and we are to branding, communication, and design. Every week, we talk to a person from a different career. And today, let's dive straight into embedded systems. Undi, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Ray Martin. It's always a pleasure to talk to
Wonderful.
you.
So, you started your career started in Chennai, but before that, did you have aspirations of being anything other than an engineer?
Yes, actually, I was very interested in physics when I was in school, especially high school,
Okay.
and that did not pan out for different reasons. So, but I also like solving logical puzzles and things like that. So this seemed like the next best fit, if you will. So
But the stream that you went into was electronics engineering, right? Or
correct. Yeah. To put it more concretely, what we call ECE, Electronics and Communication Engineering, which is a stream that it at least has been popular for some time. So yeah.
okay. And at that point, did you think of a career or career objectives, or you were tinkering around with things that interested you?
At that point, to be frank, I was reeling from the loss of not being able to make it into that physics stream that I wanted. So this kind of almost was my backup, so to speak. And even within the electronic stream, just based on the nature of where things were at the time, especially with the job market. A lot of it was pretty hazy in the sense that there was at least when we first went to college, it didn't seem like that there were that many opportunities. But I also I think had was in the right place at the right time, because that was when the Indian IT industry really took off. And I in my college I was doing like this project where I just again, like you said, just for giggles, I had installed Linux on my system, and I was just playing around with it, and my project wasn't that, and that eventually landed or put me in a spot where there was somebody who was interested in an engineer who would be able to work on these things. So that kind of like led me to that. But I'll be honest, it wasn't necessarily like a very specific designed choice that I took. It, like I said, there's a multitude of things that happened to land in that specific sequence. So I ended up being in the embedded systems group at HCL, where I was recruited out of college.
Oh, so you got a campus placement
Yes,
from
I was.
HCL.
Yes, again, I have to say, because I had looked when I was entering college, I had looked at the previous batches and seen things seemed very dire in the sense that there were very few people. And I can give you like numbers too. I guess like the previous batches, there were probably around like a total of 10 people who were recruited out of college. But then we were again
Wow.
at the right time where it more than 150 of us got recruited right out of college. So again, I can't put that to just my own talent and work. It's also being at the right place. So yeah.
So the project which you worked on, the Linux project which you worked on, you think played a role?
Absolutely, because the all the other people with me who got recruited at HCL, they went to one division and they didn't have any prior Linux experience, and this put me in a different spot where HCL had this client who wanted somebody with who could work on Linux, and that's kind of like took me out of the other streams and into this. So yeah, again, did I know that it would play a major role for me?
Not
No,
before you.
it was just
Yeah,
something that I was
yeah.
interested in. So
So do you remember some of the early things that you did at HCL? What were the kind
sure,
of
yes,
jobs you
yeah. I started off as being which is in the standard IT model, which is of the onshoring and the offshoring. I started off being an offshore engineer, and that was my first exposure to this model. And we were doing a lot of maintenance related work where the initial development work was done, and then we were kind of like expected to carry it forward. But for me, just coming out of college, even that was a lot of learning. We actually were running on two different systems, so all of that was really good for me in the sense that there was a lot of new stuff that I was continuing to learn. And again, fortunately for me, I also had the good fortune of pretty much almost at the beginning, I would say like 6 months or so, being able to go on site, and that too in multiple locations. I first came to the US 23 years ago. It was only for like a month and a half. But even that experience was good because it exposed me to all these other people who had a different way of thinking about how to develop systems and design systems and things like that. And so that aspect, but I also try to keep myself open in the sense because I had like different roles. It's not just one role, and that also opened up avenues to me because first on-site was to the United States, but then immediately after, I also had a stint in Europe and Belgium. But that was a whole different role with a different team, and again, it was a different set of things. And then all again, pretty soon after, I was again deputed to Canada. Again, it's a whole different environment where I was at where we had to deliver things, and I went in pretty much as a consultant, but I ended up doing like the most of the actual work. I was only supposed to be like an advisory role or helping them out, but I ended up doing most of the work. And then again, these are all very different things, and this is all within the first year and a half of my joining at SAIL. So all of that was actually really really good for me in the sense that there's I again, just because I did not restrict myself to like I am only going to do this or I am only going to interested in this, it helped open up a lot of avenues for me.
So how would you adapt to different problems being thrown at you?
But one of
Because
the
I assume that if that was in a different field, it didn't mean that you could apply previous knowledge. So what would be your method of solving something that was given to you?
That's a good question. There is some level of overlap in the sense, at least in terms of the some of the domain aspects, but some of it only. But a lot of it was new to you. The big advantage that I had was because I was an engineer just fresh out of college. I could say I didn't know anything, but I was also willing to put in the work at that point. Because I was curious, I was eager. So if it meant long hours, that's fine. I can do it, and I optimize for learning. Let's just put it that way.
So
So
give me an instance of a problem that you solved, which any engineering student today would understand, even if
um,
it's not something that is, within their scope of learning currently, or related to something that they might have learned in college, but when you apply it, there is a different set
okay.
of parameters that come in.
Yeah. I'm just gonna take the example because I'm just use because my example would be that of like where we had this system where we had to interface to a new device, which is a printer, and it was a custom printer meant for this purpose. So and we had to interface to it using like a custom protocol and things like that. So again, I had no knowledge of the custom protocol or any of those things ahead of time. But when I first started working on the interfacing, there were some glitches that we ran into with right where it wasn't performing the way it was supposed to. Again, I was in the end debugging meant just using pretty much fundamental computer science concepts of like where this protocol had. I mean, when you send just to back up a little bit, it's kind of how you say something and then you expect the other person to acknowledge that. We call that an act. So I wasn't looking for the act, and it was something as simple as that. But it again, you had to kind of know that okay, that protocol expected that. But it's a very fundamental problem that spans, pretty much a lot of different areas in applications. So.
So you've spent time at HCL, you went on site and then returned to India, and that continued for how long?
The first couple of my years at HCL were like that, and then where I had like multiple trips, and that was a lot of learning. And then right after that, it was about a year and a half where I didn't go anywhere, and I could feel that difference where I wasn't really learning as much, and I could also see that my peers around me were getting promoted and things like that. So it led to a bit of an identity crisis for me at the time because I wasn't sure like if I wanted to continue or whether or should I wait for these other opportunities to come to me or should I look outside, but I also was there was another path which probably would have worked, which I was very interested in out of pretty much while I was in college. Was I realized that my background was not in computer science, and if I had to like really go to the next level, I needed that technical background. A lot of whatever I did was self-taught, and so I was really thinking about a master's degree as well. But I also realized it meant a lot of upfront investment, and I also had to support my family at the same time. So it was
Right.
trying to like balance all of these. I was in that the next, like I said, that year and a half was a bit of it was a bit of haziness for me. So
Okay. So when did you make the transition to the US permanently?
so
Or, when did you start working for a company in the US?
yeah, so I can tell you this because this was almost 20 years ago. I was again while I was looking at outside opportunities, I got this call again to the same to the same place where I've been in the U.S. saying like, oh, can you go for like 3 weeks? And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not? And that 3 weeks isn't done yet because I've been
Didn't
here
end.
since after that. But I also have to say this because that 3 weeks initially there was again some maintenance work, and they kind of added because there was more work needed. They kind of kept extending my stint. But I also want to mention this the importance of having a mentor because what happened at that time was I was in this mode and I was doing this work, and there's this other person who was a senior person who was kind of getting some of the output of what I was doing, and he really liked what I was doing. And again, fortunately for me too, he was in this new project where he had a fallout with another senior person, and so he needed help, but he also wanted somebody who would be able to he didn't necessarily need the knowledge, but he wanted the attitude and the willingness to put in the work. So again, it wasn't like I was looking out for any of this stuff. It was just that I was fortunate enough to be noticed by this person. So, and he pulled me in out of this other mode that I was in and into this really, it was, I would say it was a year and a half of really, really, focused, hard work. We would both come in at like 7:30 in the morning, and we would leave at 9:30 at night. But it didn't feel like a lot of, like it wasn't tedious. It was a lot of very interesting work. And what was also funny is he introduced me to like really strong, the American dark coffee. We would have this container, and we would buy coffee by the because we had these curie cups.
Yeah,
We buy them by the case,
they have
and
those
we
huge
would just,
glasses.
yeah, and we would like because it really helped us. We were just in that zone, and I'm still very grateful for both that senior person who helped me, get out of this other mode that I was in. He really encouraged me, and also the manager at the time. I still continue to have very good relationships with both of them because they really identified me as somebody who could be mentored and um, who could be relied upon to deliver as well.
What exactly was that project?
That's a good question. This was an embedded system, and they were in that space where they were paying to be able to build up that system. They were paying somebody a lot of money, so they wanted to get away from that, and they wanted to build it up and support it themselves. So it's a lot of knowledge that had to be gained in order to one build it up from scratch, this whole new system, because we couldn't have any connection to the old system. Whereas we had to build it up from scratch and also have the knowledge and expertise to continue supporting it, because we had to support it for the next 10 to 20 years. So it was so there was a lot of, and it was pretty much like a 3 or 4 person effort, but it was a small team, but it was very focused, very driven, and we did a lot of things. So that was really
So
good.
that was the early days of the internet. You had broadband as well. Did it involve supporting several devices within a network? What was the kind of complexities that you encountered?
That's a good question. So it's a very custom network. It wasn't connected to the direct internet. It was because it was a very heavily regulated industry. So we couldn't like expose it to like the outer world. So let's take for example, this involved contracts with the different within the US. It's usually states, but internationally also, like within different countries. I'm just going to give like one example. Let's just take the like France, for example. So you would have this network that was geographically distributed all over France, and we would have like 10,000, 15,000 of these units that had to be connected via satellite or other mechanisms to this centralized system where think of it almost as an ATM type thing, where the ATMs are distributed all over, and you place what you want, and that transaction goes to the centralized server where they record it, and you get like a receipt. So it's this end kiosk that we were really responsible for. So we were building the software and bringing it up so that then the business application could then run on top of it. So these were geographically separated, but we had to always ensure, because time was money, right? Especially when you have all these different things like these promotions and things that come up. So these had to be really reliable. They always had to be connected to this remote system. So there's a lot of emphasis on, like I said, it was also regulated. So we had also have to make sure that the integrity of it was also correct. So
Okay, great. I'll come back to you after making some small announcement. I'm speaking about careers in embedded systems with Unnikrishnan, who's based out of the US. He started out in HCL. He was recruited from the campus. And one of the things that he did, which played a major role, was that he worked on a project which used Linux, and he understood Linux better. That turned out to be one of the most important decisions as far as the entire market was concerned, because that put him on a path to learning about embedded systems, because he started going um, to various countries. He started working on projects. He said Belgium, Canada, the US, and then back to India. But then one of the good things that he got from working at all these places was the exposure and the understanding. And of course, when you have that and you have the right attitude, luck seems to find you at a point when you don't think it will. So, a person who mentored him saw the potential, brought him in, and like he said, they worked very closely for a year and a half to solve a major problem, which involved building an embedded system within which would support a private network which had kiosks across countries. In the next segment, I'm going to talk to him about salaries, of course, because that is what most people do want to know when they want to get into any particular position. But I'm also going to talk about where do embedded systems really, how far have they progressed? Because that's another interesting point of conversation. If you've liked what you've heard so far, please share, subscribe, and let your friends know. Because if you're pursuing or you're interested in embedded systems, I'm sure this session will be of use to you. So, Oni, tell me this particular network, at that point before the internet became widespread, updating it, maintaining it was all done remotely, or would you have people go and fix things at certain points in time?
So these were also connected using custom protocols, and this we there was a lot of emphasis on the reliability of these protocols because, like you said, because these are geographically distributed, sending someone over to fix a particular problem meant a lot of money. So we would try to do as much as possible reliably through these protocols. So which is another area which again I did not, it wasn't like I was specifically planning for it. I worked in that area and it led to again a lot of exposure for me within IGT, which is our customer at the time. And because we were the some of the work that I was doing again had to be in a state where it wouldn't fail. We just couldn't afford it because otherwise it was a lot of damages and things like that. So again, that was another area where it wasn't something that I planned for, but it helped me out. So
Okay, I'll come back to this, but one of the things that people most want to know is that how do you figure out salaries and where they start in this? What do you see today of entry level salaries and how do people progress? What is the career path?
um, I would say there are a lot more opportunities now than when I started. Yesterday, I was just looking at LinkedIn and I saw this like ARM, which is a company, which is a chip company, which manufactures most of the mobile phones that we use. They are expanding into India and they're doing a lot of work, in that space. And I also, right now, as part of my work at Bose, I've dealt with like a lot of other companies who have like big bases in India and things like that. So I would say if you're keen, if you're interested, there's a lot of opportunities in India as well. Like right when you're starting out, you can get to interface and to learn from some of the best minds in the business. So um, as for salary, it also depends. If you're in a more service-oriented company, obviously it's going to be not as much as when you're like in these hardcore tech giants, which are product-based, right? But I would also argue that, especially when we're starting out, optimizing for learning is something that, at least for me, has held me in good stead. And I wasn't really looking. The one thing that I didn't, I shouldn't paint it as rosy as that. I knew I had to work in order to support my family. There was no question about that because, like I said, my preference would have been to go for a master's, but I knew I had to support my family. But it wasn't like I was looking for the highest paying company or any of those. So I still was made sure that I got enough to be able to support my family, but optimize for learning as well. So.
Okay, so if a student is in the third or fourth year, what kind of projects would you ask them to look out for and what should they be preparing themselves for?
I feel that there might be a couple of opportunities here. like I have interns come to me at my role. Like, I have right now I have there's a few interns. They're very smart kids, but I also feel that they're also way more prepared these days, where they've had multiple steps. So I think internships, although I'll be honest, I don't know what the current situation with regards to internships and companies in India now are. I've been a little out of that space, but that I'm hoping that that's one avenue, because that's probably like the best thing, because the company actually gets to see you in action, and hopefully, they're able to assess you outside of an interview. So that would be one thing. The other thing would also be, like you said, if there's like interesting projects that you can pick up, especially if they intersect with something else. That's because embedded systems by themselves are more, I would say, for lack of a better word, infrastructure. Right? They're not. Although there's a lot of cutting edge work, I shouldn't like try to downplay it. But if you can do that at the intersection of something else, like for example, edge AI or edge machine learning is one of the things that's happening now. So if you can combine those two, you literally have an edge in that sense. So that's, I feel that's the second avenue. A third one would be open source projects. That was what I was like, because again, your work there speaks for itself, and there's no barriers in embedded in open source, because nobody knows who you are. It's just your code speaks for itself, and you can be a 16-year-old, doesn't matter. But that you're putting yourself out there, and hopefully that helps you as well. So
That's a significant difference, I think, for in the last 20 couple of decades. If you're into open source, and if you projects that you've been working on when you're in college, and they're documented and they're out there on the web for people to check out and see what is happening, it's a
absolutely,
far better way to ensure that people know what you're talking about and begin to take it from there.
yeah,
I don't know why at times people are just, there is a sense of saying marks are very important. Yes, marks are important. I'm not at any point saying that it's not important to get those marks. But along with that, there is the lack of real world experience, which acts as a significant barrier. And if they're able to get past that, then I think it's a lot more, open. A lot more doors will open simply because of that factor. Now,
absolutely.
in the company that you were working with earlier, how did you see the embedded systems change, or how did you see work within the company change once you had built those systems?
Um, some of those have to do with like where you kind of have to upgrade every few years, just because of like just because the competition has that, and so you're kind of like competing in that regard. Like, oh, they have 2 USB ports available, so now we have to make 3 USB. But it's sometimes it's silly stuff like that, but it's also like where just purely based on specs, there's an update path that's going on, and also it depends. If the It also depends on the nature of some of these services or products as well. Sometimes you have to design for something being out there for 10 years, so you put in a lot more initial effort into that. But otherwise, it's if it's a more normal like 4 or 5 year cycle, then you don't have to put in, you don't need to account for like I'll give you an example, is the choice of the storage that you use. So these systems have come a long way. Earlier, they used to be like you would be able to write to them like 10,000 times before they ran out, or before they would start getting corrupted and issues. Now it's 100,000 or a million or more like that. So that just purely that difference in technology by itself makes possible a lot more things which weren't possible before. Like for example, if there's some analytics that you want to do. And previously, it wasn't possible because you had to be very careful about what you wrote to this. But if you like to have a million writes now, definitely there's more you can write to the disk and be able to get at later. So that's some of it is technology based, but some of it is also like also based on changing consumer taste, for instance. So yeah.
This is a slightly tangential question. That is, when a whole lot of constraints are put on you, like storage was an issue. So you had that point when 8-bit games had to come in where you had to imagine the whole game within a very, very small footprint. Now, the thing seems to be about improving the graphics, but it's not as if, I don't know, is gameplay getting as complex or is it getting as tough today as it was back then? Simply because you have more storage, have people got less disciplined?
Um, I'll qualify that by saying I don't have that much experience, but in that space. But I do agree with you. I feel like I think I forgot the name of the game, but somebody was telling me it's like it required like a gig of storage just to like install, and that's just insane to just assume that someone is going to have that much. But I can try and talk to one thing which I like is a current thing too that we're looking at, which is there are still still a lot of cases where the size and other constraints still matter a lot. Like for example, like I said, I work at Bose, right? And the headphones that we manufacture, one of the things we have to do is one check that we have is like, oh, can it last the distance of the flight from New York to Sydney, which is like a 14-hour or something flight, right? So we want to be able to make it last for that duration, which means we have to be really careful about how much resources we use and things like that. So those are parameters. There are still those still matter. So there are fundamentally two very interesting challenges too, because now you have to figure out more and more clever ways to do things. So
Yeah. And what you just said, I think, came very strongly to me when I used to think of noise cancellation as a fairly, remote kind of problem. But when you're traveling in a flight, the speakers that they give you, the one that is handed to you, are more like earplugs rather than speakers.
yeah.
You can't hear a thing. With the volume turned to maximum, what you're trying to listen to over the sound of the engines is next to impossible. So it's fascinating how, to apply technology in a place where you don't expect. For example, you say, how do I keep out the sound of the engine? Obviously, I can't turn it off. But what do I do to prevent that? So could you talk of the kind of things that you have seen, which in the normal course of things for, let's say, earlier products that have been made and what was solved at that point before it came to what is there today?
Yeah. Like there's different kinds of things. One example which I briefly alluded to, analytics part. It's playing a huge role in what we do now, which wasn't previously possible before. And again, even though we still have these constraints that we have, we still are big on it because it gives us a whole bunch of feedback that we wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. And we really go all in on those to improve our systems a lot. So that's one big area. Another area would be like where even the noise cancellation, the nuances vary quite a bit. Like with the headphone example and the flight example, I'm not really the expert in this, but I have like some secondhand knowledge where it's a more defined problem in the sense the background noise is constant. So you kind of can tune for that, and and again, just looking at the battery usage, for example, it's a very steady state system in that sense. But recently we introduced these what are called these over the ear earbuds, which kind of like look like earrings to you, and that comes. Those are really cool. But with them, uh, it's a whole different set of problems because now you're exposed to like you have to account for like wind and fast changing conditions and things like that. So those are all different parameters which again, if you're just interested in like challenging problems, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be like an AI problem. These are things which require real application of technology and other things to be able to resolve some of them. So
And it's fascinating how COVID has kind of changed so many of the audio products on the market, because one of the things that happened because of COVID is that Zoom calls became very common, and people then had to isolate themselves from the rest of the environment. And then it just became sort of part of these days. I can't seem to find young people who don't have a headset when they're going for a walk or a run, because it's almost as if it's become part of the scenery. And it wasn't the case. Okay, you could say that Walkmans and all of those were quite popular even in the 80s. But if you compare the set to what was there then and what is there today, I think there's a world of difference, right? Or will you say that they've just been refined more over time?
there is both the evolution and the revolution aspect. I would say they're both in place, because these couple of use cases that I mentioned, that's more of an evolutionary thing. But there's also other things where we've done like the spatial audio, which wasn't a thing at all before, where like depending on where you turn, it's gonna like adjust it. And the next thing that's coming up is the broadcasting, where like you have multiple people who are connected to the same source, like a TV, for example, and you can all listen without disturbing anybody else, things like that. So there are evolutionary and there are some revolutionary aspects as well.
I find it quite fascinating that, how each stage changes behavior. You first start with, you watch TV, and then all you were interested in was seeing if you could change the channel button and the volume button. And then it moved from there to say that because volume can be very loud, can it be isolated for one person? But then that takes away the whole thing of the whole family being able to participate. And maybe the next stage will be that different people within the family can hear at their audio levels rather than the same level being projected to everyone.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because that's exactly what's happened even in the Mercedes Benz cars, because luxury is about you having your seat at the precise temperature that you like, as opposed to adjusting to, anyway, a more individualistic thing. Let me make the announcements and come back to you.
Sure.
I'm speaking to Unnikrishnan about embedded systems, and he spoke about the kind of projects that young people today should be looking at, and how they should look at open source, and how they should follow what is happening within the embedded space in order to ensure that they're in line for the opportunities when companies like ARM and Intel. Okay, I'll reconfirm that with only when I get back to him. The other thing about salaries, yes, the it's important to look at salaries, but it's also important to look at which opportunities come your way at a certain point in time. And today, embedded systems, there is a lot more opportunity which is opening up, and especially with these large companies setting up base in India, it gives you a chance to straight away get into a specialized field or to expand your knowledge and to start working on systems which will be globally in use. Now, that's a very important aspect of whatever is happening, because we are seeing that advancements are now spreading much faster. A whole lot of systems which used to be unique to one particular region are now available across the world because distribution has improved, knowledge of systems has improved, and people know what they like and what they want. He also spoke about Bose cancellation, noise cancellation, and how the kind of problems that they currently wrestle with are quite amazing as to how that system itself has evolved from the drone of the airplane to far more nuanced sounds that currently need to be captured. In the final segment, I will be speaking to Oni about how he looks at how his career has been. And while he completed his master's and obviously got the benefit out of that, how does he look at what he needs to do next? and what his thoughts are. So if you like what you've heard so far, please like, subscribe, share, let your friends know, and let's take it from there. So, Uni, what are the kind of things that when you look back at your career, you're saying that, okay, where do I want to go next? And how did the Bose entry come about?
This happened during the COVID lockdown phase, where there were some challenges with where I was previously, and it led me to have a serious rethink about where I was, because I also had a really young kid. Being having a family and needing to support things puts a whole different, again, frame and constraints on what you can do. So I was also, I
Right.
realized, this at least 20 more years of me having to do this and continuing to support them. So that's what led me down this path. And I also, the other realization for me was that I was in that previous ecosystem for a really long time, where a lot of my skills were being attuned to that as opposed to being more general and being able to navigate different things. So those were things that made me come to that realization, and it was a real struggle for me because, again, I really had only the skills that were tuned. So
Okay. And where do you see things going from here? What are the things that you're happy with what you're doing? You think you're in a place which offers opportunities for growth. So how do you look at
um,
planning your career? I
I've
know
been
it's always going to be, there is never a horizon. It's like the horizon, it keeps shifting every time you get close to something. But
absolutely, yeah.
no,
Um,
please go ahead.
yeah, and for me, and I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse. I haven't been like trying to like micromanage or plan it too far ahead. I try to keep myself open to things that come up. Like for example, right now I'm in a technology management role, where a lot of my work is still technical, but that's more in making sure that they meet the standards of what we need to do, as opposed to doing the work myself. And I'm also in a lot more mentorship and other types of roles. If you had asked me 5 years ago if I would have been interested in this, I would have probably said no. So and this role right now is proving to be very challenging, because there's a lot of things I have to unlearn but also learn. So it keeps me on my feet, right? And I have to still put in a lot of work. But it's again, it's a whole different perspective, because for now my team comes first. As opposed to anything that I want to do. It's a different take on things. And do I see myself doing this in 10 years from now? I don't know. So I'm not trying to like pigeonhole myself.
And what you just mentioned about the first part, you spend the first decade of your work experience trying to figure things out and how good you are at solving problems. And then you have to transfer that same individual problem solving skill onto a team where the team has various attitudes, it has various kinds of people, it has various qualifications. And you have to understand what that team is capable of and how to build it up, which is a completely different challenge. So, did things that you learned from your mentor play a role in helping you navigate this?
Um, Yes, because there were really like two people. Like I said, my direct mentor, who was more of a technical person. So what he did helped me in like like you said, the first decade was just pretty much learning, and then the second decade was like kind of almost, I wouldn't say like mimicking him, trying to be the person that he was, because he left and I kind of really had to step in his shoes and lead the team for the next 10 years, which again, that it would be, it's the same thing, like it's a thing that really, what would Dave do, which is really what, which is putting myself and just trying to think through that, right? And there was also another manager who was also very supportive supportive of me. And sometimes I now use those things, like, what would Ray do in trying to, like, navigate some of these same things. But obviously you can't just blindly copy them, but try and apply some of those principles. Do I have all the answers? Absolutely not. A lot of times it's a real struggle, but that's part of the fun too. So
Is there a point at which you understood that my role has changed? I'm asking because I think there was a point at which, in my career as well, presenting to the client was never supposed to be a. The creative guys were the backroom chaps. They were not really up there in front,
yep,
and the servicing or the account people would take over. But somewhere I felt that if I really had to bring out what I had put into it, maybe my passion or would show up a lot more if I did the presenting. So that was a kind of point at which I think I shifted,
I see.
because it meant that you now have to say that, yeah, maybe it's not a role that I really enjoy, but I also know that there are certain things which I think I'll be able to explain better.
Yep.
So did you have any of those things, or they are hard to identify? I'm not saying that there is a point which happens in everyone's career, but I think it's also an internal thing.
Yeah, I didn't have it like as like this epiphany type thing. It was more of a slow realization that where am I better serving the organization, right? And where is the impact of what I do? And so that, even though am I a natural at the role? Probably not, but that's okay, because I can still probably deliver things and do things that in the manner that they expect. So it has been a slow evolution. So.
Okay. And doing your masters while you were working, was that something that you would caution people against, or you would say that it actually gives you fresh perspectives as opposed to old ones?
So I'll try and tackle that a couple of ways. Well, and this is the thing I actually tell even my team members, like the people who are just fresh out of college, who let's say who don't have like who are not maybe in a relationship or have kids or whatever. There is a lot more free time now, so just go for it. And again, this is one thing I wish I had when I started off, because it's my master's was entirely online, and I still haven't stepped into that university yet, but I still got a lot of quality education. And for me, at the point where I was doing it, it was really, really strenuous, because I was juggling a lot of things. I was working full time, and I had a really young kid, and there was a lot of personal things like family issues, like health issues
Right.
going on at the same time. So trying to navigate all of that was meant it took me 5 years to actually get that done. But if let's say people, like I said, people who are at the beginning of their careers, there's a lot more time that they have to be able to put into this kind of thing. So, and again, if you're fortunate enough, like I was, where my company eventually paid for a lot of those. I just had to make sure I was working there for a year or whatever after the thing was done, so that it was beneficial for them as well. But a lot of it paid for itself. But it was morely my thing was more in terms of the time commitment. Waking up at 4, just doing all of these things, assignments, and all of that. So that's, I would say, it's a little easier for people who are starting off. But for the people who are mid-career, or anyone in that phase of life, you probably have to like pace it a little, to be for it to be a little longer. Like I had to, and I've seen people who are doing this. Some people I know, they're not necessarily like a master's, but they're doing like an MBA or whatever. But it is possible, and things again are a lot more possible now, which again is something I wanted to come back to when you were asking about like what do people out of college do. They can
Right.
start some of these things, even like the thing that I did, which was a master's at Georgia Tech. A lot of those videos are available. It's just that you don't get the full proctoring and the community support and all of that, but you get that education. It's available. So why not? You're spending time watching YouTube videos anyway, so why not do this? So that's another thing
Yeah,
that I would
yeah,
mention. And one more thing, sorry, I know I'm jumping on topics, but I just realized I had to mention this again in terms of the things that people could do, right? Is networking events, which are huge now. It's like all these open source and all these summits and all these things. You get to meet the people who are at the at the forefront of all these things that you're doing, right? And there's never been like a better thing to be able to do those kinds of things. That even in India, there's I see a lot of these things that go and look online. There is an India, version of that as well. Typically, there's a
right.
US version, there's a Europe thing, and now there's an India version because there's so much, interest in here. So those are opportunities that I feel that people can take advantage of.
Yeah, the networking aspect is really it's not just for embedded systems
Yeah,
network, but
absolutely,
for,
absolutely. And I wasn't necessarily talking from
yeah.
that
No,
perspective.
I'm saying that I was using it more as a pun rather than
Yeah,
saying that, yeah, a network is not just something that you think is in the cloud or,
exactly.
it's really something that you have to build. But have you found that your recruits of late have been a little less forthcoming, or are they social enough? Have you found their social skills to be on par, or have you found that they're not the same as before?
That's a good question. There's definitely a generational gap, but at least in the and I've only looked at a very narrow sample, but the people that I work with, the junior engineers, they're very smart and they're very some of them are really driven. They know exactly what they want. So in that sense, and maybe I'm dating myself a little bit, but it's like where growing up in India, like you respect your elders, you're expected to follow like that pattern. And that's not something that I see. They're not afraid to challenge you, and in a lot of ways, it's also good because it keeps you on your toes. Issuing an edict, so to speak, right? You have to really work with them. So yeah, are there things that are different? Yes, but again, I don't know. I guess at least in the sample space that I've seen, I haven't seen that as being a barrier. So or a negative, I should say.
Okay, okay. And some other things that you feel in embedded systems is evolving faster, or do you see opportunities? So let's say one is the field that you're in, which is sound systems. The other could be, but is it something that is there in practically every product that you have today? So it's not as if there is a specific thing that you need to look at.
Oh, absolutely. It is pretty much pervasive, and the more digitally connected the world becomes, the more it is going to be there. Like you have these smart refrigerators or what have you, or even like mobile phones are obviously the most common example. But there are a
Yeah.
lot of other places where you wouldn't even think that they're there. I don't know the exact number, but I've been told like a typical automobile these days has more than 30 or so processors or something. So each of those controls a different aspect of the systems, right? So or your Alexa device, or any of those things, those are all things that have at least one chip embedded within them that play a very specific role, like you alluded to at the beginning. They're not meant as general purpose things. They have very specific thing that they do, and it's only going to grow more and more complex, like your robot vacuums, for example. That's another very good example of a specific embedded system that is grown and taken on a lot of complexity, but also it's a very fulfilling field. So yeah.
So maybe that's the point at which we will end this conversation, which is the life was simpler before the net came into being. Today, everything from a banking transaction to driving to anything that you do seems to be getting more and more complex by the month, by the year. Is that good or bad?
um I I mean, I probably am a little bit. I don't necessarily catch up with all of the latest technologies, things like that. But there are like sometimes where I look at like a problem and I'm like fascinated by it. Just again, just like how would you how would you solve it technologically, and things like that. But I do try and take a backseat to some of the cutting edge stuff. So even though I am in some of these very same systems myself, like even with the Bose systems that I have, I am not, at least these days, I'm not the one who's using all of the more advanced features and things like that. But I see younger people who readily exploit that and use that, right? So I guess it's a balance. So
Mental.
yeah.
You're right. Rationing this or focusing again in terms of what your interests are and what your things that you want to go more deeply into is one of the ways that you can protect yourself from getting lost in the fire hose of information that one has to kind of take all the time. Great. Thank you very much for being on the show, Uni. It's been a real pleasure.
So it's great to
let
talk
me
to you.
make
Yeah,
let me make the final announcements and just come back to you.
sure.
That was Unnikrishnan AM, working at Bose, and he's given you a great idea of what embedded systems are, what they can be, and what the future looks like. So feel free to delve into it, take a look at it deeply, and understand where the potential lies. Next week, another guest, another career. Until then, keep watching.